Hello, and welcome to another Institute for Sound Public Policy podcast. I am your host, Kevin Lynn, and I'm also the executive director. And today we have a really interesting, what I know will be a very interesting podcast, because we have a return guest. This is the third time that Tom Luongo has been on our show, and he always thrills our audience. I view Tom as one of the finest geopolitical analysts out there, and he has been in rare form the last several weeks as geopolitics, world trade, economics are really coming to the fore. Now, a little bit about Tom before he comes on. Tom is a former research chemist, which I think gives him a really great perspective. I mean, he probably thinks more in terms of atoms and molecules and what actually makes things work than theories. He is an anarcho-libertarian. He writes for, in addition to his own website, which I'm going to go ahead and show the audience before we leave today, Gold, Goats, and Guns. I've been a subscriber for many years now, and I strongly recommend that everyone else do so as well. Tom also writes for Zero Hedge, Newsmax Media, Bitcoin Magazine, and LouRockwell.com. So without any further ado, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. How are you? How you been?
It's been insane. Watching the ups and downs is, we look at the movement of people, capital, and goods across international borders so that, we actually push back against these neoliberal principles that seem to beggar the many and enrich the few. And we've had, in terms of issues to talk about, a real abundance of riches here. It's just been so much going on with the Trump administration. And what's great, Tom, is this is the 100th day of the Trump administration. I know that he's going to do a big rally in Michigan tomorrow, but there's some specific things I'd like to talk to you, because it seems every once in a while, you'll do a podcast, either one of your own or you're a guest on one of the podcasts, and I'm triggered by something you say. I'm like, whoa, he said it. He went there. And
you're not alone, by the
way. And it's so what I'd like to do is, but before we get into some of these specific things, is really kind of get your overall take of the last 100 days and the implications for the future.
They are profound. And I don't say that lightly. And the next 100 days are going to be just as profound, but in a possibly different way. So literally, I just got finished writing this month's copy for my newsletter that I write for Newsmax every month, Ultimate Wealth Report, and that's literally what I was talking about. That was the title of the issue draft that I sent in, which is the next 100 days, right? Big changes coming in the next 100 days, but the first 100 days have been very interesting because we got, so much winning, and I mean we got winning in ways that I never would have thought we could get done in 4 years. I mean, to be honest, so I'm already happy with what's been done. Okay. Now, simply because I didn't expect anything to get done ever, and our other choice was Kamala Harris, which was a smoke 'em if you got 'em moment, and where are you going to expat to, because they're just going to destroy the world, these freaking people. So. I was extremely happy. I still am. It's been the last 25 days or so have been a little rocky, to say the least. And that's because Trump finally decided to rip the bandaid off of the global trade imbalances that have existed, frankly, since the birth of the Eurodollar market in the 1950s, which never really benefited the United States. It benefited certain people in the United States, certain political constituencies and their fellow travelers, certainly. And in my parlance, my simplified parlance, like Trump, I like to keep things Sometimes I like to keep the terminology simple. There's just people who are just commies. It doesn't matter. Like, Trump doesn't know the difference between a tariff and a duty and an excise tax. He just calls them all tariffs, right? Doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, you're talking about a system of trade and governance, which was designed from the ground up at a policy level, bit by bit, block by block, inch by inch, to destroy the United States' comparative advantage and hand that back to the old colonial powers of Europe. That's the overarching theme. Now, they built China up at the same time, thinking that they were going to, destroy the United States and, like locusts, wipe us out because they've already done Europe and they've already done everywhere else. So now let's take all that capital and let's go over to China, and then we'll use all that money and power that we build up there and go through that like a bunch of locusts for the next 50 or 60 years. Problem with that is the Chinese said no, because they have a long memory. And at some point, the United States said no. And that started in 2008 with Ron Paul. And then, they played defense for as long as they could until eventually Donald Trump was elected the first time. So now that we're here, what Trump is now saying is I'm going to do exactly what I was going to do in my second term originally, which was I was going to remake global trade and change the dynamic of having dollars go out along with all the jobs and all the money and all the profit, because we really haven't profited from any of this. The reason we haven't profited from it is because everybody else bought all our debt and we're paying them the profit in the form of coupon payments on our debt. That's the way this has worked. That's the classic extraction methodology of the colonial powers of Europe. They used to do it with raw goods and industrial might versus, and now they just do it. And they've always done it with money and arbitrage, currency arbitrage. And now they've just, moved that up into the financial sphere through the manipulation of interest rates and sovereign bond yields and all the rest of it. Trump is trying to end all that. And now, but he wasn't able to do it in his first term, really, because we hadn't separated the price of money and the price of the dollar on the international markets from those that controlled it. We printed the dollars, they controlled the price of them. And so what was set up, and I've talked about this many times, but they set up under Jerome Powell and John Williams at the New York Fed, switched us onto SOFR, secured overnight financing rate, and eventually we sunsetted LIBOR in the process. And what has SOFR done? SOFR has given the United States back for the first time, honestly, in its entire existence, control over our cost of capital and the cost of using dollars around the world. That's upset a lot of people. It just has. And they understood it from the beginning. And they've attempted to take SOFR down multiple times. And their most recent attempt was, the other day, April 6th through the 9th. So after the Liberation Day announcement of the tariffs. Now, when you think of that as the culmination of the first 100 days in office, what you wind up with is this, what looks like now a very perilous state for the Trump administration, because they've had their temper tantrum. They fought back. They attempted to take out our bond markets. It failed. And now you're watching Trump and Scott Bessent roll out the next phase, which is they're going to cut a deal on tariffs with China. They're going to isolate the European Union, try and end the war in Ukraine. And then the last thing to do from there after that is to then say, look, this is working. We're bringing in insane amounts of money on a daily basis. This is working. We can cut the income tax for the lower middle classes in the United States, which was always, they've been effectively signaling it forever, Kevin. Like, this is what they were going to do. Now, your globalists, your typical globalists over in, dead enders over in Davos and in the European Union, who are their political arm, they know what the end game on this is. And that's why they keep choosing war. They've chosen war in Ukraine. They've chosen civil war at home. They've chosen to put Mark Carney in charge of Canada. We're doing this on the day of the Canadian elections, and everybody expects Mark Carney to win. We'll see what happens.
Is that kind of goes back? Jerry Salenti has this phrase: "When all else fails, they bring you to war." Is that really what's been going on? And we kind of see that it's almost cyclical as these banks, Euro banks, begin to fail. They create the war where they get to hide all their sins.
Right. Well, but sadly, Gerald, I think, has gone off the deep end in his hatred for America. And a lot of people have, because the portrayal of America has radicalized a lot of people against their own country. And that's actually part of the psyop. Like,
wow, that's a rabbit hole and I would love to go down with you. Because
we'll do that.
There are people like Catherine Austin Fitts, who I really love her work, but she just seems to, it's like she's become such an anti-Trumper. She doesn't have TDS, but she's like, oh my God, they're going to bring in, the electronic dollars, and they're going to control us, and it's like
listening to Whitney Webb anymore. I can't do it. Let's deal with the problem. Let's deal with the person in front of us. This is the thing. I think I started to really get this feeling that we were being played very, very early, like 2017, 2018, even into 2019, during the first Trump term. And I did a lot of media, a lot of interviews and shows with Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou of the Duran. We used to do stuff like almost weekly, right? And I remember, and this is when we were, this is before the Duran blew up, and all props to Alex and Alex. They did great work. But one of the things that they never really wanted to accept was that it wasn't was my argument that Europe is trying to get Russia and the United States into a war, or Russia and China into a war, the United States and China into a war, in order to bankrupt them so that the capital can all stay in Europe. So what they were trying to do in every way was to keep capital from fleeing Europe, as we all sit there and look at the industrial production numbers coming out of Germany and all of this stuff, and we're like, how is the German Bund still trading at a higher rate, at a higher price, relatively speaking, than U.S. debt? Doesn't make any sense, other than it has to be this overwhelming, City of London, European media blitz of America's going to die. America's going to die. America's going to die. You amplify. When they had full control of the social media, that meant amplifying voices who were anti-American and, denigrating or squelching voices who were trying to either give one a balanced view or to a relatively pro-American view. So if you were pro-American at the time, like Steve Bannon, not that I'm a big fan of Steve Bannon, but if you were like Steve Bannon, they sent people after you. If you're Alex Jones, they tried to shut you down, take your company from you. They deplatformed you. People like me, who were in this kind of transition from being upset with the fall of my country and how far it's fallen from its ideals, to, wait a minute, am I being played here? I was able to skate through that simply because they had already squelched me to the point where I wasn't ever going to break out until Elon Musk bought Twitter, and things kind of changed at that moment. So, and again, I'm not grousing here. I'm literally explaining what happened. But you can see that that's why they wanted to have control over this. And I kept saying, this doesn't make any sense at all. And then you really start to dive into the dominance of the dollar in global markets, and you ask yourself, like Brent Johnson would asked himself. I just had Brent on the podcast, and so his ideas are fresh in my mind. I'm like, that just seems stupid. At the end of the day, we may be in terrible shape fiscally and financially, but everybody else is worse off than we are. And we had a bunch of vandals who were unelected put in power with a mushroom sporifying in the White House and queen of QE and yield curve control at the Treasury Department, Janet Yellen, who's about as smart as my dog. And I mean that sincerely. Like, every time I think about Janet Yellen at this point, I get viscerally angry at how dumb she is. Like, she's really stupid, and everybody just needs to get it through their heads. She's a commie, and she's stupid, and she works for globalists because she did everything imaginable.
It's as if they set
the European Union,
and they set the bar so low with someone like a Janet Yellen. When you have someone like a Scott Bessent who gets in there and really understands what's going on and possibly how to fix it. Hey, Tom, I'd like to show you a movie of. I was at a conference in the summer of 2024, the National Conservatism Conference, and Bessent spoke, and I took about a minute and 30-second clip from it. And when he spoke, he just seemed to have this grasp of economics that was just coming out of left field that I found really intriguing. And maybe that's a good way to kind of segue into what Trump and he are up to. Here we go. Sure. Let me go ahead and pull that up. I'm going to move this other one to the top. Click that here. Put that over there. And the movie. Alrighty, here we go. And let me know if you can't hear that, Tom.
But on our side of the aisle, there's a lively, important discussion about the government's role. And I will tell you, good policy, in my mind, is never made in haste. The national mood may change. Basic laws of gravity and economics don't. I think of economics as biology. A lot of my contemporaries think of it as math and physics. It's not. It is a living organism, and we have to be very careful when we adjust the organism. And I think that is this great discussion that's going on here. Our side can broadly be defined in two camps. Traditional free market advocates who want to reduce the government's role and promote international trade. On the other side, a newer generation of conservatives are pushing back against orthodoxy, favoring a more active approach to greater self-sufficiency for the U.S. economy. At the heart of the debate are a range of tools like targeted support for specific types of economic activity and tariffs on imports. I will refer to these policies under the umbrella of industrial policies. In my view, we must take the best insights from different parts of the conservative movement to shape an economy that delivers for the American people and safeguards our national security.
All righty, let me go ahead and go back. I was like blown away. The economy as a living organism that you tweak and you push. You don't just like come out with, wow, here's the spreadsheets, and they take us into the next decade, and this is what we can look at for growth. And there's no, and because it's like, wow, there's things that we invest in, grow, nurture, things we cast off, and we might have to change course halfway through. I mean, to have someone like that who is now in the position that he's in, it, to me, is remarkably refreshing and gives me a lot of reason for optimism in the long run.
Yeah, I would agree. This is downstream of the old John McNamara when he was in charge of the Secretary, in charge of the Defense Department, famous for his, basically his, technocratic approach to the military and run. This is why we lost many reasons why we lost the Vietnam War, but that's one of the reasons. And that's downstream of, everything that James Burnham talked about in the managerial state, right? That this was just, we were being beset on all sides by technocrats.
Right.
And when I brought up this point originally, I invoked Alexander Mercouris over at Duran earlier in the conversation, and now that we're talking about this, I flashed back to a conversation he and I had when I brought this up, and I said, well, they're just a bunch of bloodless technocrats just trying to move levers and push the slider to the right, and then instant Malthusianism, and this is why we need to do X, Y, and Z, and the world's going to end. And he's like, and he would say, Tom, to remind you, and I do a very bad London accent, but the Soviet Union was the ultimate technocratic state,
Right.
which is why I call it the EU-SSR, because it's a more perfect technocratic union than even the USSR was. The USSR was built around these technocratic lines, and if you didn't get with the program, well, then you were sent to the gulag, and then you just became a statistic. And that's the way they think in Europe. They won't get out of that mindset. And
why do you suppose that is, Tom?
Wait, stop for a second.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Let me finish this point, because this is really important when you understand the divide within our culture. What did they do? They cultivated an entire class of bloodless, upper middle class, white, waspy technocrats to become their brown shirts. They're the ones with Trump derangement syndrome. They're the awfuls. They're the affluent white liberal women, or female liberals, affluent white female liberals, awfuls. Right? That's who these people are at every level. When you sit and you chat with them, they have this glassy-eyed look of arrogance on their face because, well, you're just a mouth-breathing redneck. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Clearly you can't, you don't know how to manage a group of people. I'm like, to what? The gulag? How about, I don't understand these people, but they're lost. They're lost in their left brain dominated ideology. Now I'm bringing in Ian McGilchrist and the Master and his Emissary when I talk about this stuff. They're stuck there. They're stuck in that mode, and they will absolutely not allow any other ideas into their head, because they do fundamentally believe in the world is a machine, humans are robots, and biological systems are tamed by technology. And that is insanity. Now, I invoked my antipathy to people like Whitney Webb, who go out and warn us about the end goal of the Peter Thiels and the Palantirs and all that stuff. And I say, okay, is that where all of your analysis leads you? Well, we have a problem now. We have really powerful oligarchs right now that are hundreds of years old, inbred, with their tentacles deep in every economic system around the world and political system around the world, with real political power. And you're worried about the next round of oligarchs, the new boss that may be the same as the old boss, to quote the Who. Honey, I don't have time for that. I got these people, because I know if I break these people, these people go back to the formation of the Bank of England in 1694. They go back to the old Venetian banks. They go back to the split in Rome. They go back 1,000 years. Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are they're like
neophytes.
Nouveau riche. Yeah, they're nouveau riche, for Christ's sake. They don't even know what the hell they're doing. They're just a bunch of, relatively speaking, they don't even have that. Their ethos and their telos is completely different. Their ethos is different. Therefore, their telos, what they're going to implement, is fundamentally different, even though it may look the same on the surface. And that's the problem with people who have been ratcheted up into a constant state of fight or flight, where they can't think rationally. All they can do is zero in on a threat. So the right brain is your threat detector, and the left brain is the targeting reticle. Well, if you shut off the threat detector because you just see everything as a threat, then all of a sudden, anything that looks like anything else that you've ever seen before is you aim your targeting reticle on, and then you can't get off of it. And that's the way they are. And for the bloodless technocrats of our modern left, are awfuls and company and soy boy males and are well actually redditors, right? Those guys, to them, that's their targeting reticle, and everything looks like that. That's their hammer, and everything that Trump does is a nail. Whereas Scott Bessent is looking at this holistically and going, we have to change the dynamic. We can't, technocracy has gotten us to this point. But now we have an entire group of, freedom fighters per se, or libertarians, or whatever the hell they want to call themselves this week, who are so skeptical of everything that they don't want to commit to anything. They just want to sit on the sidelines and be critics because they can't let go of their targeting reticle and they can't see the forest for the trees. So they see the phrase fourth industrial revolution come out of Putin's mouth and think Putin works for the WEF, for example. No, it means a fundamentally different thing to Putin, that phrase, and or me or anybody else than it does to formerly Klaus Schwab and his banana hammock over at the WEF. Like, it's a fundamentally different thing. It means one thing to John Kerry and Al Gore and Tony Blair and Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates than it does to Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and even Vladimir Putin or anybody else. And that lack of nuance is amplified because we now all speak to each other on a daily basis through social media and text, which is the exactly worst kind of way to discuss with each other, which is why the growth of podcasting has been so revolutionary. Because now I can have this, I can't do this in a 280 character tweet. I can't even do it in a short Twitter article. But you can see me talk about it in a 5-minute rant, and you know that I'm serious. Because you can see my body language. You can see the conviction. You can see me like looking up into the right and seeing me access memory. So you can see all of it, right? And that's why this is such a powerful thing. And I'm not just talking about me here. I'm talking about everybody. You can see it when you look at Scott Bessent talk. You know he believes this shit that he's saying. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant, but he at least believes it. And now I actually have something real, right? In the past, when they controlled how the soundbite on major media, you got whatever version of the story they wanted because the editor is the storyteller. Now we don't. Now we just have unfiltered guys, idiots like me, pontificating for an hour and a half, and you get to decide whether I'm full of shit or not. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? So it's a good thing.
Isn't it amazing? It's opened the door to actual critical thinking when the narrative is no longer controlled. And what's amazing is I'm not sure where this, I'm hoping there will be such a great reveal of what has been going on over the last 4 decades. I'm someone who, I cut my teeth in activism with Ross Perot, pushing back against NAFTA, GATT, the WTO. I ended up working for him for 2 years after the election because I was a volunteer during it and hired me on. And then he actually fired me in '94 for someone who couldn't shut his mouth. I mean, I was literally told, if you don't pipe down, you're gone. And I'm like, no. But,
okay.
Yeah. And then I left politics for a while, got back involved. But I've always been looking at this narrative that's being pushed, and they're talking about prosperity, but how can you have prosperity when you're literally gutting the middle class? I mean, when I graduated from high school in 1980, I didn't have to go in the army. There were manufacturing jobs everywhere in my town. We had, Olean Tile, Fasten, several other small manufacturers, and time you get on with Bethlehem Steel, and you could work for 30 years and then retire. That doesn't exist anymore, Tom.
I know. It's all useless, purposeless jobs, pushing paper around, or enforcing rules that no one needs to, that no one asked for or nobody wanted, and aren't doing any real work. and it's empowering petty tyrants everywhere. There's nothing is worse than the tyranny of the third class functionary who works over at the local government office. Like, there's nobody worse than that. There's nobody worse than the HR nanny. Right. There is no tyranny greater than that. You'd think Donald Trump is tyrannical. Karen, sorry, you're the tyranny that no one actually wants to deal with, and they know that. So much of this is very deep psychological projection, I think, of what they would do if they had the power. Well, they do have the power, and then they understand that if someone like Trump comes in and upsets the apple cart, they won't have power anymore.
Right.
And since they are unreconstructed now, in many ways, and unreconstructed atheists, and I mean that term in this particular context. And I'm not a particularly religious man, openly or in any kind of organized way, but I do believe very sincerely that everyone has a religion, period. Some people it's libertarianism, some people it's trad Catholicism, some people it's technocracy, some people it's the managerial state, some people it's it's Islam or whatever. Everybody, and there are guys out there who worship friggin' Harry Potter, whatever. They're if you don't have a religion, you're going to create one. Like, this is the ultimate irony of Marx's statement that religion is the opiate of the masses. Marxism has become a religion that is an opiate for those who adhere to it. It's hilarious. I mean, Bitcoin has become a religion to these toxic Bitcoin maxis. I can't deal with them anymore. I can't deal with my libertarian brethren anymore. They've all jumped the damn shark. Like, none of them have a practical or game, a strategic bone in their body. I'm like, point to my part of my board game collection behind me. They're carefully curated, by the way, for the shot of these are the games you should be, like, some of the games you should be looking at. And when you think about that, and you realize that you're fighting at every level a kind of religious fundamentalism that exists within the administrative state, you are literally having to fight against and now deprogram people. And the only way you're going to deprogram them is to take away their advantages, which is why we're doing this on April 28th. And now we have J.B. Pritzker and others out there echoing what I saw from David Brooks over the weekend, which is to say, well, these judges who are, resisting ICE and harboring fugitives, well, it may be illegal, kind of illegal, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. This is literally now them calling for civil disobedience to allow violent gang members to stay in the United States. Why? Because they understand that if they don't defend these guys and they allow the Trump administration to do what actually needs to be done, they will lose their power permanently. Elon Musk tweeted out the other day, or retweeted an analysis that if you got rid of all the illegal aliens, there is no contest. Today, there would be a 27-seat majority for the GOP in the House. And those 25 seats or 24 seats that they would pick up wouldn't be your typical GOP dead enders that we're still saddled with. They would be all fire-breathing idiots like me going, no, that's enough. Enough of this crap. Cut the budget, cut it all, tear it all down, and cut first and let God sort them out. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And that's what they're afraid of. Because they know that if Trump wins on any front, Ukraine, tariff war with China, 51st state with Canada, any of this stuff, if he wins on anything, if he deports, 5 million illegals, guess what? He comes in with tax policy and tariff. Right. He's got tariff policy changing the dynamic, bringing in, upwards of $5 billion a day into the United States. or at least erasing $5 billion worth of costs, which I think this is the way Trump phrased it to Maria Bartiromo the other day, and how she phrased it yesterday on her show. We can do some math, and it's probably closer to $2 billion a day. Well, I got news for you. $2 billion a day wipes out half the federal budget deficit. Right now, done. Pays, and it makes people like Thomas Massey look like idiots for complaining that they're still spending too much in D.C. on Biden's budget. Okay? Like, we can balance the budget. We can get rid of a lot of stuff in rescission. We can do all sorts of things, but we have to get you on. But you have to come on board with us and stop using, as you pointed out earlier, these CBO projections of spreadsheets of inputs that are completely divorced from reality and how we do the budgeting thing in Capitol Hill. Like, think about this, Kevin. And no one wants to address this. And even our best and brightest, supposedly, libertarian minds in Congress, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, both got this wrong. They missed the fact that there is no link whatsoever between how we collect the money, how we spend the money, and how we budget the money. The budget is set by a stupid CBO rules and quote-unquote best practices. We got 14 computers just making money, and we've got a collection service that doesn't tell the Treasury Department how much money we're actually bringing in, and then how that and where that money goes. I mean, it's just three different piles of money. A pile of money we spend, a pile of money we take in, and a pile of money that we supposedly budget for. There is no mechanism. And this is supposed to be the height of technocracy. This is supposed to be the height of efficiency. Are you kidding me? Is that air you think you're breathing? And you call yourself a libertarian? Like, why would you believe the CBO budget projections about anything? Like, Thomas Massey is against the budget because they're going to add so much money to the like, fuck you. You don't even know. The CBO's never been right about a budget projection in their entire life. And you complained about this. And then you have the damn nerve to grandstand and showboat? Yeah, Trump's right. We should primary your ass out of Congress. You're not a hero. You're actually in the way. You're just another religious fundamentalist, not actually engaging with the practical day-to-day of how to fix anything.
So you think Massey really...
And I'm over it.
This is pure ideology with him, or is there something else, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know him personally. Maybe he does mean well. I don't care. I understand, but I look at this and I say, wow, I'm literally standing in the midst of all these people who are supposedly my fellow travelers intellectually and philosophically, can't understand the parameters of the game that's being played and the war that we're actually fighting, because we're fighting a war.
Right. And
that war
that's
is
the
financial
amazing
first
thing
and
to me.
everything else second.
Right. Again,
and he's been in Congress how long, and he still doesn't understand how the friggin' plumbing of the global financial markets work. Like, dude, I didn't understand a minute of it back in 2018, but here I am, and I'm I'm the guy everybody wants to talk about bonds and currencies with. I can hold an hour and 45-minute conversation with Martin Armstrong, and have him go and have him challenged for the first time on a podcast in forever. I'm not busting my hand, patting myself on the back. I'm just saying I did the fucking work. Why can't you? You're in Congress. You're supposed to be representing me. I'm not supposed to do this work. You're supposed to do it. And if you were so goddamn committed to fixing America, why the hell haven't you reached out to offer me a job or somebody like us actual jobs to get you up to speed? No, you want to grandstand in front of cameras and run yet another, you want to have your hobby. It's the same problem I had when I went to the Mises Institute back in October. I said, it's time to get off our hobby horses and go help these people. Let's fix the country.
You're right, and they don't.
And
in fact, I will say this, Tom. Over a year ago, I did try to get an introduction to you with Speaker Johnson. It didn't go anywhere.
I'm not surprised whatsoever.
Well, I've kind of been persona non grata myself.
Yeah, but the interesting part about this, Kevin, is that the fact of the matter is that I know full well that the administration's listening. because there are people in the administration listening. I know there are, because I see my talking points come out of their mouth.
Absolutely, Tom. And they do listen. You're familiar. I spent a day with President Trump in August of 2020. He said something really silly, and it was August 2020. And then I had he wasn't doing anything to seriously on the immigration front when it came to employment visas, even though he said in 2016 no more Disneys, we're going to outsource all these IT people and bring in H-1B visa dependent companies to take over their jobs. Well, it was going on in the Tennessee Valley Authority, and Senator Jeff Sessions, who was running for his old seat at the time, asked me to come down and speak at a rally in Huntsville, Alabama.
Right.
And I went down and met these workers who were getting, who had already started the process of training their replacements. And they were outsourcing this to 3 H-1B visa dependent companies. Capgemini was the biggest one. And this was all going through because the CEO was fine with it. Their CTO had done a run at other places where they had done exactly the same thing. And I'm driving back up through the Shenandoah Valley, and I'm thinking, only one person can save these jobs, and that's President Trump. I mean, he actually, because the TVA is a quasi-public private entity, he hires the board. So, but I had no connection. Amazingly, with my immigration work, no connection with the White House at this time, other than to kind of rant like a madman from the outside. And I did an ad, and the ad itself cost only $6,000 to do. But the distribution cost me $100,000. I had to go hat in hand begging people. I said, and we got it throughout the TVA, but also all the channels on Fox that we knew President Trump watched. And he saw the ad, and he had a fit on Twitter over it because I knew the ad would piss him off. And, it started with, who do you think the wealthiest, highest paid federal employee is? Does he live here in the White House? No, he lives here in Knoxville, Tennessee as Jeff Lyash, CEO of the Tennessee Valley Authority. Last year, he made a total of $8 million in total compensation. And Trump sees it, tweets out, everyone knows I hate Jeff Lyash, and who are these U.S. tech workers? This is fake news. So all of a sudden he was getting pushback. Like Ann Coulter was like, you need to be talking to these guys. And then a few days later, Theo Wald, who was deputy director of domestic policy, reaches out and says, hey, can you bring a handful of workers up to the White House? And I did. We sat with Trump there in the cabinet room. And this is where I kind of felt, I have a man crush on him now because, we're all in the cabinet room sitting around waiting for Trump to come in. He comes in the side door with Pence, and we all stand up and we sit down. He sits, just to my right, and he looks over at me and he goes, you're going to have to move down because all they're going to say is we weren't social distancing. So I'm like in the cabinet room going, cut the... And then he just he's getting to know everyone in the room, and he's got an executive order in front of him that I helped write, and he goes, just before the press comes in, he goes, all right, everyone, listen up. If anything good happens here today, no one's going to hear about it because the fake news is coming in, and and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, he was doing stand-up. And they come in, when he speaks, he fires the chairman of the TVA, the board, not the CEO, but the chairman, one of the board of directors. He reads and signs an executive order I helped write that would create a firewall around the federal government, getting rid of H-1B visa dependent companies. And it's like you're saying, Tom, he listens and he thinks. And his comment to me when he found out I was the one that did the ad, he goes, that ad really pissed me off. I'm like, oh boy. And then he goes, but you made me think. And that's why you're here today. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I bent the knee right there. It's like, dude, I mean, Matt, you would never. And the thing also, too, and I've been around presidents in the past, and, there's always a handler. Oh, and then you're going to do this, Mr. President, and then this, and here. He was like large and in charge right from the get-go.
Right.
So I feel so much of what you're saying, because they can be reached, they can be reasoned with, and we've not had that.
What I've noticed, and this is, and I wouldn't say any of this if I didn't have like 24 examples. Right, the first time it happened, and I caught Laura Ingraham using the phrase Davos, which that was me, 2017, called in the Davos crowd, and then it's on Laura Ingraham, and then it's Tucker Carlson, and now it's everywhere.
Right.
It's everywhere. Like, everybody uses the term now, and it's brilliant. I've heard Orange Jesus come out of their mouths. I heard when I floated the idea that Trump should run for Speaker of the House, Trump 6 weeks later had to have Stephen Miller come out and deny that he was interested in it. Okay? And then Matt Gaetz gets up there and says, yeah, I nominate Trump for Speaker of the House. And I'm like, okay, this is getting interesting now. So what else can I say? Let's just see if we can get right. And so it's very obvious. It's not about me, dude. I don't care. This is just about, we need to fix all this. And however we can get our ideas into the, into the zeitgeist, that's how we do it. I was, everybody was like, are you jazzed that the Libertarian Party is running their 2024 campaign on the idea of become ungovernable? Like, no, not really. I wish I was, but I'm not, because I know what's going to happen. They're going to destroy it. Like like Dexter White and I created that out of whole cloth. That's all we did. But it was the right thing. And I still get memes coming back to me all day long from people like 4 years later. I'm still getting memes, right? And it's good, because it means that you're being effective. Ultimately,
absolutely.
That's it's important, is that you're being effective, and that when you bring up ideas, even if you're stretching a little bit about what is on the horizon or what you think could happen, what you're able to do is make a good argument for why they should do X, Y, and Z, and they may take it in, and we go from there. I can tell you flat out that I've had people like, reach out to me a couple of times in the last couple of months saying, look, I have a direct line to Elon Musk. I can get an idea in front of Elon. You need to, watch out for this. How do I phrase this? I'm like, this is how you phrase it. Done. And then send it off and, hope that it has some effect or it doesn't. And again, I find myself at this moment in time, I think you do as well, in a position where if you do the work properly, you're kind of a nexus point for everybody to filter ideas through. And of course, I have people try to send me ideas all the time that are garbage because they're clearly coming from MI6 or the Mossad or from this one or that one. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not responding to that. Clearly, I can tell the difference between AstroTurf and reality, right? And that's the filter that has been honed, I think, over the last 7 or 8 years of doing this.
Right.
And now and in many ways, part of what I attempt to do, and every time I do a podcast like this one or any other, is that there's a bit of performance, there's a bit of information dump, and then there's a bit of teaching. I teach you how to read the news, how to read this, how to read that. And I can tell you that it's gotten to the point now where I think I've taught it. I mean, I have it come back to me. I think I've taught it to enough people now that it's become its own kind of critical mass. That's why when a guy like Mike Benz can come out behind the woodwork and catch fire immediately. Mm-hmm. Because we've already done the hard work in 4chan and here and there and me and that whole zeitgeist of people who are capable of reading and mapping the world correctly, tokenizing it in the form of memes and talking points or articles or podcasts or whatever, seeding it into the zeitgeist far beyond what our official reach numbers look like. And all of a sudden, you've created this is the phrase, you've created a standalone complex where no one has any idea where this idea originated from. They just know that it's out there, and it's now permeated the zeitgeist. And honestly, look, the guys at the bowels of MI6, they understand this. The CIA, they understand it. All the intelligence services, they've been doing the same thing to us for years. Okay? I got news for you. We've become as good, if not better than them. You know why? Because there's more of us than there are of them. It's not about me or you or some rando on 4chan or whatever. It's about everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And now we're in a world of overlapping and competing psyops. I'm generating mine, they're generating theirs, and we'll see. I'll take the high road, you take the low road, and we'll see who gets to Scotland first, right? Like that's the whole thing. And we'll see. But again, I mean, this is about the method more than it is now, I think, anything else. And I don't know if this is where you wanted to take this conversation.
I'm having the time of my life right now, Tom. This is good. Fantastic. We're at the 51-minute mark. We usually keep it about an hour. No, it's like we're there.
I know. But we can do this for 3 hours. Like it's not even.
We
hard.
could. I mean, the stories. I mean, I thought it would be always fun, and glad I got to see it. Well, you and Dave Collum got to do podcasts together because you're both chemists, and it's fun to kind of see that. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, it's just it goes fast, but I would love to get your thoughts as you project forward. What the administration needs to do to pull off what they've started, to be successful. Because as you said, I mean, they're coming. It seems that they, just as they hit them with the tariffs, the Europeans respond, attacking the bond markets. But amazingly, what someone said in a recent podcast I heard, he said it's not necessarily your ability to damage, but your ability to absorb the hit.
Right.
And we took the hit, and the markets are back up. And
it's not only are the markets back up, but as a point I tried to make to people recently. I think I made this point either in one of my podcasts or a podcast that I was on. I made this point, which was, so let's look at the bond. Let's look at the 10-year yield. So 3 weeks ago, it was around, before the tariffs, it was around 4.3%. Where are we today? About 4.3%. There's all these gyrations, but all that matters is, where you close at the end of the week. Like at the end of the day, on Friday, the smart money is going to make a decision where they want to place their money and have their risk on a Friday. It's something I learned a long time ago when watching the gold market. Because gold only trades between in the United States, trades between the hours of 8:30 and 5 o'clock. And it trades 23 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 23.5, 5 days a week, 23 and a half hours a day, 5 days a week. And then it takes the weekend off, just like oil, just like the stock market, just like everything else, right? And, one of the things, you have to remember is that the Friday close and the weekly close of all of these markets is very important, because that's when traders have to put up or shut up and go, am I willing to hold on to this position for 2.5 days before the markets open on Monday morning? Because the greatest damage happens after 5 o'clock on a Friday and before 8:30 on a Monday, or really now with the European Open, before the European Open at 3 a.m. New York time in London and Brussels, or London and Frankfurt. That's when that's a big risk when you have capital at stake. When you have billions of dollars at stake, you have to really decide how you're going to position yourself for that 60 hours or so worth of uncertainty where you have no control over the price. And everybody learned this during COVID. And and the most extreme example I can give you of that was COVID. Because what was the inciting incident for the markets seizing up in mid-March? It wasn't COVID. It was the OPEC Plus meeting where Putin came out and said, we're not cutting production. That was Friday afternoon, Thursday, or late Thursday, early Friday afternoon. Oil was trading at around $80 a barrel. We woke up on Monday morning, and oil was trading at 40.
Right.
Because
I
they
remember that
ramped
day.
up the COVID talk, they bombed the markets, and they have the price of oil, and they seized up the U.S. Treasury market within 48 hours, forcing Jerome Powell to come to the table, have to defend the bond market, go to the zero bound, institute QE, and all of that stuff. And it was all timed. And at that point, I was already a skeptic of the whole COVID narrative then. Because, and I think that was the same week, or if not the week later, that Trump starts talking about ivermectin, and then ivermectin became a four-letter word that we're not allowed to say on television. It got added to George Carlin's list of dirty words, right? And I went, oh, it's an operation. Right after that, I blew up at Lee Stranahan. I used to do a weekly show with him and Garland Nixon on Sputnik Radio. And Lee was all angry and pissy with me because I was refusing to accept the whole COVID lockdowns and everything else.
Yeah, I mean,
he came in to ambush me, and I had none of it. And I walked up and I just hung up the phone. And then he lost his freaking mind.
Yeah, that just created a bifurcation in the room. I mean, literally, the question I ask invariably will ask someone, how many jabs? And that kind of sinks in. If they're waving a Ukraine flag, if they've got TDS, well, they've been jabbed multiple times.
It is funny when you say that, when you put it in those terms. But when I bring that story up, because now you think about it in the context of what we talked about at the top of the podcast, about when you targeting reticle, threat, this, that, everything else. They got people fearful, and people lost their reason. Good people like Lee Stranahan, who's really good at what he does or did. Like, seriously. But it all hit at him at a particular moment in time, and then he couldn't handle it.
Yeah, people like Nassim Taleb too. Yeah.
Nassim Taleb, completely lost his mind. Completely lost his mind. One of the smartest men in the world became an instant moron overnight, and it's pathetic. It's sad. And I'm like, oh my God, if they can get Taleb, they can get anybody.
Yeah.
So what defense does my 18-year-old daughter, 19-year-old daughter have against these people? She doesn't even know she's being programmed by them. I have conversations with her about this stuff at this point. I can't even talk to her about politics anymore, and simply because on certain issues, she's gone. And then everything, and then at that point, all that has to happen after that is everything gets conflated.
Yes.
I'll give you a perfect example. When I was 19 years old, I would never vote for another Cuomo in my entire life. You want to know why? When I was living in New York, 18, 19 years old. You want to know why? Because he took away our orange and blue license plates and gave us those ugly red, white, and blue ones. I'm like, you guys, you could go out and you knew it was a New York car because you at a glance because it was orange, and everybody, and at that point, all of the states went to some variation of a white background so make it easy for cops to read and dark lettering, and that's why they did it, and it was terrible. I'm like, my instincts were right. Never vote for Cuomo. They all suck. I'm like, I used to literally walk around as a 19-year-old going, he gives my people a bad name, being Italian. But
interesting.
Not for any substantive reason, but because he took away my license plate. I understand that level of rationality when you're that ignorant. Because I used to be that guy, right?
But like you said, on that weekend, that commodities trader thinking like they do, it's like, wow, where is the real risk? Well, it's not with the U.S., and when you were saying that, I thought there was that great line or scene in that show Mad Men. Have you ever watched that?
I watched a little bit of Mad Men. Mad Men was a great show, but I never really watched it sincerely. So I was one of those things.
A big devotee. Well, there's one part where the one partner is like, we got to fire this senior associate because he tried to scoop me on a deal, or he went and talked to a client before I gave him permission to do so. And they went in to see the big head partner, and the head partner sits him down. He says, Now, that associate, do you know who his mother is? And then he goes into the whole lineage. These are like the Knickerbocker Society. And he goes, every firm's got one of those. And I'm not going to have her at some club saying bad things about our firm. And the guy goes, well, why is he working here then? He goes, well, his grandfather owned like this big chunk of Manhattan. But when the Depression hit, he froze up and he sold for dimes on the dollar, and they lost. And then he goes, I think it was, always bet on America. And I'm like, yeah, I'll send that clip to you. I actually have it somewhere. Wanted to bring it up, but couldn't find it. But
no, it's a great idea. And so to add into that point, thinking back to when I brought up my days with the Duran boys, I said, look, it was those moments, right? When those conversations that I had back then eventually led me to, oh, of course they hate the United States. There is no free speech in Europe. There is no sovereignty. The people are sovereign and the government is subordinate. Anywhere across the world enshrined in the Constitution. The UK, not the UK, but England nominally has that, right? Because it goes back to the Magna Carta, but it's a living document, so it's not, you know what I mean? It's not the same thing. I mean, even Alex Mercouris, like as a lawyer, as an English, made the point. He's like, yeah, Tom, what we have is good. What you have is far superior, and it is precious and needs to be preserved. I'm like, exactly. And it was a point that Dexter White made to me, years ago when I was, in my, hate America mode as a person. He's like, look around and tell me, is there any other place on the planet that's as unique and as vibrant and at a fundamental level as the United States? Well, legally, economically, this, that, and everything else. We have betrayed our birthright. Our government has betrayed our birthright. But the question is, how was it betrayed, by whom, and for what purpose? And can we get it back? Well, clearly, the team that Trump has around him this time understands that. And I think that, I'll always credit the patron who, when I first started going down the rabbit hole about SOFR versus LIBOR and Jerome Powell and all of that stuff that I've talked about ad nauseum, the day he said to me, he uncovered for me, he's like, I traced Powell's lineage just out of curiosity. And he's like, that dude's 8th generation American. He goes back to the colonies like Jamestown or the early Virginia colonies. I'm like, you really think he's a race traitor?
Interesting.
I'm like, no, I don't think so. Scott Bessent. Interesting note, knowing that little bon mot and then having played this out over, a couple of years of watching Powell in action, when Trump sends out his nomination letters about each of the cabinet members, what does he spend an entire paragraph talking about at the lower third of Scott's nomination letter? His family traces back to the French Huguenots of the 1680s. Blah, 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 blah. Scott's family has, been a part of the greatness of America for, and he's determined to make it great. Like, that was a tell.
Yep.
And you got to know, personnel is policy, folks. I've said it many times.
Absolutely.
Say it again. Personnel is policy. And these people, you can look at the whole cabinet, from Hegseth to Tulsi Gabbard to Bessent to Powell nominally being a member of the cabinet and others. Like some of them are a little squishy. I'm not, a big fan of Marco Rubio. I'm not the biggest fan of Howard Lutnick. I'm not, there's people that I'm not a fan of. But Doug Burgum and others, these are people, first and foremost, they may have some weird ideas in their heads. They may have, they may not be perfect, but at their core, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, these people are freaking Americans first and everything else second. Mm-hmm. And, they're going to be attacked relentlessly as our enemies attempt to drive wedges. and use our anxiety over things not moving at the right pace.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Tom, because I had mentioned in our newsletter, yeah, there's things that I'm not. There's things I'm elated over. There are things I'm not. But it's tempered by the fact he's only been in office 100 days. He's still got the mainstream media against him. I mean, let's cut him some slack.
Yeah, it's not just actually. I guess I never really did answer what was going to happen in the next 100 days. Now you brought that up, I'll bring the conversation back around, doing the Trumpian weave thing that I always do, which is the following: the next 100 days are going to be dominated by Davos striking back. They're going to attempt. Well, I think we already see it. I don't know what happened here. I mean, I'm a fan of Ben Davidson over at Suspicious Observer, so the blackouts over in Europe today could just be the sun burped, and Spain and Portugal and whatnot took the brunt of it, and it could easily have been a false flag of some form or another or whatever. We're going to have a summer of violence. I brought it up earlier with Pritzker and everybody else. They are going to do a summer of violence, civil, quote unquote, civil disobedience. That will be like the summer of 1968, the year I was born, 2020, yada, yada, yada. That's their playbook. They've done it before. They will do it again. And they will do it in order to try and bind Trump down so that he can't get anything done and he can't get a budget passed in the fall. I'm dead serious. That makes the most sense. You just have to think about the game board and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And as always, maybe a better analogy is the following. Up until, I'm a hockey guy. Up until, say, last summer, they were on a two-man forecheck. Right? In hockey, you send two guys. You send the two wingers in to try and pressure the defensemen so they can't get the puck out of the zone, force an error in their own zone, and break up their attack there. And it's an aggressive, it's like a full court press in basketball. It's like a zone blitz on defense in football, but it's the two-man forecheck. The opposite of that, and you do that when you have fast skaters and you have the advantage physically and systemically and everything else, and you can play a high pressure two-man forecheck game. When you don't, you fall back into the left wing lock, what is known as the neutral zone trap. You stand up on the blue line, you stand up on the red line, and you try and force an unforced error in the neutral zone that way. You drop five guys, clog up all the passing lanes, and don't let them do anything. They have moved into neutral zone trap territory. If you're a hockey guy, they're the 1995 New Jersey Devils. Okay? And who won like 2 or 3 Stanley Cups playing the trap with Martin Brodeur in goal. And that's where Davos is right now. That's where Europe is right now. They are defending against Trump the same way that they ordered Zelensky to defend against Putin in Russia. Defend everything, don't give an inch. Run out the clock. Help is coming. We have political help coming on the form of money and getting control of the American political system. And I firmly believe that Trump was supposed to die at Butler, Pennsylvania, install Kamala Harris or Nikki Haley, have a placeholder as president, continue to destroy the United States from within, and run the table and force us into World War III. And that was the plan. It failed. We're on a different track now. And Trump and Putin are both wise to it, very much wise to it. And so it's going to be an ugly 4 months. And that's okay. They have to shoot their wad here. And if we survive it, there are very good times on the other side of this. And it's why Trump and Bessent now are talking about, we're going to get trade deals. And we're going to get the tariff revenue coming in, and the customs revenue and the duties and excises and everything. We're going to get that coming in. And then we're going to cut the income tax and eliminate it for everybody making under $200,000 a year.
Wow.
Now, that's carrot. It's going to take 3 or 4 days for your favorite thing that you buy from Amazon to get here in 4 days from Amazon. I suppose Amazon Prime is now going to be not 2 days guaranteed or overnight guaranteed. It's, some things are going to take a little longer. That's nice. Those factories in China, they're levered to the tits. All right? They have to be able to sell those products into the market at the expected margin that they took the loan out. And if you know anything about Asian financing, you realize that they don't do finance the same way we do. Asian banks don't lend against future cash flows like we do here in the United States and we do in the West. They only lend against hard collateral, against property. So this is why, and I learned this when I was studying, when I was working with a guy over in Vietnam, and I learned all of this then. And it's still true. Maybe less true today than it was back in 2012, 2013, but it's still basically true, which is follow. The reason why, Vietnam went so boom and bust between, 2010 and, 2009 and 2012 was because in order to do business expansion loans, you'd have a furniture company that would then buy, property that they didn't, an apartment block that they owned, they had equity in that they could then use as collateral against the business development loan for their furniture making company in Ho Chi Minh City. And so the phrase non-core assets were everywhere on Vietnamese balance sheets. Same thing in Chinese balance sheets. That's what's so dangerous about the empty apartment buildings and everything else, because these are the collateral that were used to build some of the other businesses that they're expecting to be able to deal with their cash flow, to maintain their cash flow by selling it to the U.S. market. That's why they're uniquely vulnerable to a high tariff. That's why they're vulnerable to all of this, and that's why China's going to settle. And I think they're going to settle in the next few weeks. I think it's going to happen.
Do you think they're waiting for a face-saving opportunity in there?
Yes, of course. That's what's going on. So Trump and Xi, for reality, aren't talking. But they're talking.
Question on that, too. Isn't another factor that, in addition to the debt, they are so dependent for IMF purposes on the dollar. They have to have those dollars to buy the resources to make the stuff that we buy from them. Isn't that? Because no one wants... I mean, I hear this about the BRICS. Oh, there's going to be a convertible yuan or a RMB. Who wants that garbage?
Well, I think it's eventually there's going to be. I think look, de-dollarization is a process. And I've said it before. And I've never wavered on this. I think that I think they're going to set those things in motion, certainly. But they have an uphill battle because, if you're not sure what's coming next, I don't have time to do a redux of it here. If you haven't listened to episode 213 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast with Caitlin Long, you need to. And it's not about me. It's about Caitlin Long.
Okay.
Because she lays it all out with the stablecoin bill and Tether and moving the U.S. Treasury market into the smallest, into parts of the world that it could never have access to in the past through Tether, which is backed by U.S. Treasuries. As you watch that happen, you realize between that, potentially Ripple or other bridge tokens taking Forex trading away from the City of London, and you realize that we are about to undergo a massive change in the way the world prices onshore and offshore dollars. And this is earth-shattering. We can't do it here in the time that we have left. It's another hour and a half podcast. But over the last three, I usually don't like to pimp my own podcast, but the last three guests that I've had on, Caitlin Long, Brent Johnson, and Vince Lanchi, this is the trilogy. This is the new trilogy of podcasts. when everybody asked, well, so where's the, I was asked for a long time. I was like, Tom, where did you, how do I get up to speed quickly? I'm like, listen to episodes 75 through 77, where I lay out the game board and I lay out why SOFR versus LIBOR and who maps to whom. These last three are the new, if those are the original trilogy, these are the prequels, or those are the prequels, and this is the original trilogy. This is important. These concepts that are laid out in those podcasts about the dollar and the treasury market and how to break the Eurodollar markets and have them and bend them to our will. Because, as we always should have been, because we're the United States, and whether you like the United States or you hate the United States, don't you think that we should have control over the value of our own currency if everybody's using it? Why should London set the price of offshore dollars? Why should China set the price of offshore dollars? We enforce par. We have the Federal Reserve. And every libertarian listening to my voice right now needs to get over themselves and realize that's the most powerful tool in the world for liberating humanity from the financial vultures and vipers and inbred pedophilic technocratic elites that have been destroying humanity for 500 years. They thought it was their tool. It's actually our tool. And then we can get rid of it.
Do you think we could have had SOFR without Powell being there?
No. Jerome Powell and John Williams were the architects of SOFR. They were the only two. John Williams was literally the architect of SOFR. Powell was him and Richard Fisher were the only real foreign monetary policy hawks during the Bernanke-Yellen years. And I know he was handpicked to do exactly what he did by Wall Street, who dominated Donald Trump's first term. And everything else didn't matter because SOFR needed to be rolled out properly over the course of 5 years in order to condition the markets in the United States to get them, as Scott Bessent said, these tools have to be put in place organically. The markets have to come to the new standard. You can't just flip a switch and turn it on tomorrow. You can't do it. We couldn't. It took 5 years to transition to bring SOFR and mature it to the point where everybody could realign their business models and change their loan covenants and this and that and all that legal work that needed to be done, and convincing the banks that this is what we're going to do and we're not going to change it tomorrow. We have all that had to happen.
Yeah, and Bessent said there are a lot of tools in the toolbox. So
many tools in the toolbox, and we haven't even begun to see what they have in their toolbox. I haven't gotten to the relisting of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the potential for doing reverse HELOCs against people's home equity. There's all sorts of ways to recapitalize the United States. And if you don't think that we don't have $36 trillion worth of real net assets in the United States to offset our debt, you are an idiot. Because we have $360 trillion in today's money in terms of assets. The state of Alaska alone is worth more than all of Europe. Fight me.
And that's a balance sheet you want to have.
I mean that sincerely. Fight me on that.
Wow.
That's the balance sheet you want to have. It's the same thing with the Russians. They have a balance sheet like you wouldn't believe. And they're not in debt. They have a debt to GDP ratio of 12%?
Right. It's nothing. It's de minimis.
They got foreign exchange reserves of $690 billion that's official. I don't even know how many thousands of tons of gold they have in the sovereign wealth fund. And they're sitting on all of that, producing somewhere between 250 to 300 tons a year of gold, which not an ounce leaves Russia every year. And, I might add, they have that at a time when the United States themselves needs a higher gold price to help balance their balance sheet. Who do you think is fighting a rising gold price right now? It ain't the U.S. The selling starts at 3 a.m. in London, and it ends at 8:30 when New York opens.
Yeah, I'm a very frustrated silver stacker. I got some gold, but I'm willing to cool my jets till the next decade, maybe.
Okay, I feel for you, Kevin. You're going to get paid. But the problem is that silver isn't a monetary metal. And a lot of people who've pushed silver over the last 10 years, and they kept pushing the fairy tale about, COMEX positioning and this and that and all, and doing a wonderful job of explaining the perfidy and explaining the corruption and everything else. And, Ted Butler, God's rest his soul, and others. But they never understood, but they never wanted to admit that silver is not a monetary metal anymore. It's an industrial metal. And they forgot their Mises's regression theorem, that which used to be money, a commodity that acquires monetary character because its use as money is the marginal is the marginal unit of demand for that commodity as a store of value, unit of account, medium of exchange, can go in the opposite direction when technology says, ooh, but we need that. And it competes with the monetary stacking versus gold still isn't there. Until we replace gold with a digital asset that we can count on.
Right.
And the people in Spain and Portugal are finding out now what it's like to not have any freaking cash.
Because if you can't get on your computer, the electricity to power your computer, you're not going to get your Bitcoin.
Well, Bitcoin, dollars, the 90% of dollars in the world are digital, folks. 98% of euros are digital. Except in Italy, where like only 50% of them are digital because the Italians are not stupid. Because they're still the smartest people in all of Europe.
Back in the 80s, I went to hear Margaret Thatcher speak. I was living in Europe for a couple of years, and she goes, Greece, the richest poor country in Europe. It's like the money comes out of the mattresses.
Greece, the money comes out of the mattresses. They have money. The Greeks are amazing.
Yeah. Well, about, getting ready for a summer of love, I found myself reading a lot of Montaigne these days. And because everyone's talking civil war, and I think we're already in civil war, but it's not going to be like North versus South. When I look for some kind of historical setting, and you had mentioned the religiosity of these belief systems, I got to look at the Protestant Reformation in France in the 16th century. And the violence climaxed, in 1572 with the St. Bartholomew Days massacre. But that was going on for decades at low intensity. Like Montaigne had said, because he was a mayor of a small city for a while, and on weekends when he'd horseback out to his estates, he said, I feared coming up on a crossroad because if there were Huguenots there, I was a known Catholic and they might kill me. I mean, it's almost gotten, it is in some cases that bad here where people are being killed in clashes right now, if not being targeted for beliefs. And yeah, to the audience, I really do agree with you in that. I think these masters of the universe are going to ratchet things back up again because they can. And, goal one will be to stop the Trump administration. So it's like, brace, folks. But if we get through it, we might be okay.
We will. No, I don't believe in if anymore. I really don't. Because, look, if you want something to happen, it will happen. Your focus determines your reality. If you focus on the negatives, you'll get the negative. If you focus on the positive, I can't help it. It's look, the Revenge of the Sith is taking in money hand over fist in the re-release in the theater. So I have to quote Qui-Gon Jinn because if I have a religion, it's Star Wars. I kid, honestly. If I have a religion at this point, it's Philip K. Dick.
And look what they did to it.
No. Many. The panoply of good and bad Star Wars projects goes all the way back to George Lucas. I remind you, he did the Ewok Adventures. Everybody, shut the fuck up. And/or go if you're not sure about what's really important, go watch. If you don't think there's base Star Wars left, go watch Andor. Trust me.
Oh, okay, right. The first couple of seasons.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the second season is out now. Tomorrow we get the glorious second phase of Andor. But what I mean by that is your focus determines your reality. It's very important to decide what it is you decide to focus on. If you decide it's all going to go to shit, well, one, you're only going to see that it's all going to shit. You're not going to be looking at opportunities. You're not going to see opportunities in front of you. It's the hardest thing. As a father, this is what I try to. I was having a conversation with my daughter, who's an artist, about AI the other day, and I know she hates all of it because she's a pen and ink artist, right? And my wife's a potter, and I'm a writer, and all of this stuff, and right. And AI threatens all of those things, except my wife is a potter because you can't have AI make pottery, which is I guess job security for my wife. But I said to her after a 45 minutes worth of chatting with her, I said, look, I've been screwing around playing with Stable Diffusion and just try and learn what these things know. And I said, what you need to realize is that everything that you have told me tonight about your worries and fears about AI and about how bad this stuff is and this, that, and everything else. I'm like, one, this is version 1.0. Two, all of your skepticism is correct. Now, what you're focusing on is the fact that untalented shitbags are using AI to get some decent results. It's never going to go any farther than people using it for royalty-free hero images for their blogs and their podcasts. That's as far as it's really going to go. And for bad mobile games and that kind of thing, right? Who cares? That's all disposable. Theodore Sturgeon's rule about art still holds. 90% of everything that was ever produced is crap.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You, as a creative, if you understand its limitations, its strengths, its weaknesses, its opportunities, do basic SWOT analysis that we do for companies, you will have a leg up if you know how to use it to your advantage to tell stories and create art that is compelling. Yeah, you will have an advantage in throughput, and you'll be able to offload the menial tasks to it and leave your energy free to do all the creative stuff. You still have to shape the shot. You still have to figure out what's going to be in the image and how you're going to look at it and how the viewer and what the color timing is going to be and that and everything. All that's there. Every bit of it. You will have that ability if you use it, and it actually sunk in.
Yeah, and it's a force multiplier, like all technological, from the typewriter to the word processor. Our CTO, she just wrote our first app using AI. And what would have taken her 2.5 years on her own took her 4.5 weeks. And it was a solution. We'd gotten thousands of TIFF files in for discovery on a case. And they're everywhere. And you can't read an image file and put it into text. But AI can. And they do it with a 95, 90. And then to take it automatically and sort it by sender and receiver and company and try to do some pattern analysis. My God, I was absolutely blown away. Now, she was pulling because it's how you interrogate AI to make it do what you want it to do. And then you're dealing with memory issues when it wants to do its thing and, just riding herd over it. But she is 3 years above most people who can code right now because of that one project. Right. It's amazing.
Right.
So,
yeah, no.
Okay, we are at 1:28. I'm going to 1 hour, 28 minutes into this. This has been, as always, Tom, amazing. It's just grand talking to you. Now, for our audience, hey, if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, we're going to first put it out on Substack because we're actually doing really well on Substack right now for our posts and our podcasts. Now it'll automatically feed into YouTube. And then, of course, we're going to load live up to our platforms on X. But, if you see it on X, give it some love, share it with your friends, Substack, subscribe, restack it, give it some love there. YouTube, give us a thumbs up, share it, because what it does is it tells all the algorithms that reward us for our content that people like this and there's an audience for it. And Tom, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's I really encourage people to go to Gold Goats and Guns. Subscribe. I've been on a Patreon subscriber of yours for a few years now, and it's been amazingly rewarding. The insights that I get, and also your sphere of friends that you collaborate with in podcasts and on posts just really opens up a universe that allows for some really deep critical thinking. So thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. I guess that's what I'm supposed to say. I do this just to give it. I do this because I can't do anything else. I'm now not even like I can't. There's no way I can get hired doing anything else at this point. But you do, the classic thing, and this is important. Like point on the exclamation point on the whole AI discussion, and everything else. Why do writers write?
Mm-hmm. And
okay.
writers write.
Writers write because they can't do anything else, according to Stephen Donaldson, writer of all that great fantasy work that has so thoroughly made my life different. At a certain point, you have to realize that if you can figure out how to do that which you need to do, and figure out, and in this economy, you have the opportunity to have people pay you, with the price of a cup of coffee, and it'll keep you alive. It's possible for so many people to produce real and abiding change, even as a side gig, while you go to your soulless, corporate job. Like, it's possible. Everybody
but also,
can do
Tom,
it.
I mean, people are, the term is based. You don't compromise. You're not worried about losing, audience share and things like that. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand, because a lot of people that, try to ride our coattails, because we have a very successful, our U.S. tech workers platform is very, in fact, we're the ones that kicked off the great Christmas Eve H-1B visa kerfuffle. It was Laura Loomer that picked up on our tweet. She credited us, which was really cool. But they, and they want to be influencers. But I would say, look, just always be based. You got to stick with your principles, your moral compass, and you may not get rewarded right away. You might be like me. You get the tar kicked out of you year after year, but you sleep well. So.
Yeah, no, you do sleep well, and yeah, I guess, that is the term. Again, like, we have an authenticity gap. I go back to one of the first articles I wrote back in when I first started blogging again. We have an authenticity gap, and everybody wants some level of authenticity. We don't care what it is, how we get it, right? And it's why I knew that Hillary Clinton was going to lose the election, right? If it was even remotely fair. And it's not that Trump is so authentic, but compared to Hillary Clinton, right. My God, he's an Amishman. Like, you know what I mean? Like Jesus. But that's the difference between the ultimate friggin', murdering grifter and the shipwrecked property developer from Queens. Like, this is our choice. I'm going with Trump. Like, you know what I mean? And I got to go with that guy. I know what she is. And but it is two things, right? Be interesting or be ignored, and quality sells itself. And you have to be able to, and you're not always going to have your best day. And, perfection comes through repetition and failure. So you just keep doing it. And then, some days you go back and you go back and you read what you wrote. That was really good. And you look at that one and you go,
wow, yeah.
Leave it all up there. Works it all for everything. And there's going to be elements, there's going to be moments in this podcast where I'm going to turn people off. I know that. I can't help it. So hopefully what comes through is that you realize that I'm not saying what I'm saying in order to get a cookie. I'm saying what I'm saying because I believe it to be at least as close to the truth as I've got today. Tomorrow is a different day. We'll figure out what happens tomorrow. So
There you go.
tomorrow, hopefully, we'll
well-planned.
wake up and hopefully Mark Carney will not be Prime Minister of Canada. But if so, we welcome all the Albertans and all the and all of those from Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Manitobans, you're all welcome. And just got to kick out Vancouver
Leave
and
the
British.
GTA away. I got to keep them away from us. Well,
Hey,
great, Tom. Fantastic having you on the show, and have a great day.
Take care, Kevin. Enjoy.